everybody, and welcome to a special edition of the Human Echoes podcast. I am Albert Berg. Tony Southcott is not here, but I am joined today via Google Hangouts by John Jones, friend of the podcast and former guest on the podcast for the Charlie Brown Christmas special episode. Say hi, John.
Hey, folks. Glad to be here, and thanks for the invitation.
Well, I didn't, honestly, this was like a spur of the moment thing for me because we both saw the Peanuts movie. You saw it like when it first came out, right?
Yeah, I saw it opening day.
You jumped on that faster than I did. I saw it over the weekend, just this recent weekend, with my son, and I gotta say, I thought that the trailers looked okay, but there wasn't much there that was compelling to me. Like, oh, I gotta see Peanuts, and I like Peanuts a lot, but I don't know. Like, there wasn't enough there of the story to make me excited. You seem like right off the bat you were in for a penny, in for a pound with this movie.
Well, it's kind of on my mind a lot. As you know, I'm kind of a fan of the Peanuts. Peanuts universe, I guess. But I'm also kind of like in geographically, I'm kind of dead center in a place that really celebrates that. I'm just a few miles up the road from where Charles Schultz, did his work. And spend a good deal of time down there at the ice arena and so forth. And I'm in an area here locally where Peanuts is an ever-present imagery. They have statues. There's this big art project in the community every year. Well, there was for several years anyway. They don't run it now, where they introduce for that given year a series of statues of a character from the Peanuts system, the Peanuts, cartoons, comic strip. So one year it'll be, here's Snoopy, and then here's Woodstock, and then here's Lucy, or here's Charlie Brown, and every year it'll be a new one. And they have several dozen large statues. And it becomes a community art project to decorate them in any kind of different artistic styling. And then they're situated around the county and permanently just set up that way. So here, just, in the town I'm in, there are several of them everywhere you go. And you just see it all the time. And I've always been a fan, I guess.
Well, yeah. And for me, I'm going back, like, it is a childhood thing for me that also links up to my dad's childhood, which is a very weird, I don't know if a lot of kids have that, but my dad, when he was a kid growing up, loved Peanuts and bought a bunch of the books. I think he bought them used like at a thrift store with his paper route money that he had, because back then people had paper routes when they were kids. And that we still had them when I was a child, and he would read them to me and I would read them myself. And like the old Peanuts books he had, like way back before Charles Schultz had really perfected the style, and you had like Charlie Brown's head was super round as opposed to just kind of round. I don't know how else to describe it. And so, as far as Peanuts itself being like a part of my life, I love it. I will argue to this day, it is the greatest comic series of all time. Second, and very, very close second, is Calvin and Hobbes. And a lot of people get in arguments with me about this, but the longevity and the continued quality of Peanuts, and just the pathos of Charlie Brown and those characters being carried through all these years is just incredible.
I would not argue that at all
about the movie.
Yeah, I was when they announced the intent to produce it. And they continued to make cartoons. I don't know with regularity, but they still introduce certain things. And there's a big event whenever there's a release, locally, to release the new cartoons. I think the previous one that was the biggest one a couple years ago was Happiness is a Warm Puppy, and they had big opening night saga thing at the ice arena. So it's a pretty big thing that locally a lot of people kind of rally around. And then they said, we're going to do it as 3D, and we're doing it with Blue Sky Studios. So it's going to have this look that you might be familiar with Ice Age and those kind of productions that they've made. People were pretty scared because people hold the whole Peanuts thing pretty close to home, and there's a lot of sentimentality about it. And I think you indicated the pathos. There's a depth and wisdom to how the Peanuts characters have been infused with, you know, their characteristics, and whether or not what they incorporate is something that is timely for, you know, what a kid is going through or what a person looks back on their childhood as. People just really have this strong affinity for those characters and for Peanuts. And sometimes the idea is that sentimentality is specific to how they look. Maybe that's the case. In any case, people were pretty scared. I was too. And then they came out with a teaser trailer some months after that. And aside from the fact that it's still within the family, they are working with a new studio to produce these, but it's still being, you know, the script was penned by Charles Schultz's son and his grandson.
At the beginning of the movie too, it says by Schultz. Like you're not
right,
like
exactly.
Get by you like, oh yeah, Charles Schultz. It has his signature.
And Gene Schultz, his wife, was overseeing the projects. They definitely have a very strong grasp of making sure that they keep the same sense about what the heart of Peanuts is about. So once I saw the first trailer, I was like, okay, I was nervous. I was a little bit concerned. I saw that and I was like, okay, I'm all in. And it's an exciting year for movies. It's exciting, you know, winter season for films. What we had, okay, Spectre was kind of, didn't go over well with a lot of people. But we have Star Wars coming out. We have, okay,
man,
my mind is...
That sucks. I've been listening to so many Star Wars, like, leading up to the release podcasts where they're talking about, like, what does this mean? This image here, what can we glean from this toy? If it comes out and it's just like, you know, it was okay. Like, that's going to be, off topic.
The one that I was looking forward to the most, however, was the Peanuts movie. And I don't know what that says about me. Maybe I should be concerned about that. But that's the one I was looking forward to the most. And while I have this personal rule, I don't go see movies on opening day. It's very rarely that I do, because to me, it's a very intimate experience. I like to be there without this surrounding, you know, noise of people's cell phones going off, crunching on popcorn, discussions, people getting up and standing in front of you to go out in and out of the seats. I'm just one of those people. I like to just be connected to what the filmmakers are doing there. So it's just sort of a general rule. That one was different for me because I'm like, if I see it Friday morning, first showing, the opening day, everybody else, you know, it's a school day or a work day, and I work from home. I have some flexibility. My daughter stayed home from school the day before. She was sick. There's this rule about you don't come to school till past 24 hours after you know, your fever's gone. So she couldn't go to school, you know, by rule. People don't follow it. I'm like, well, today we'll follow that rule because we can go to the movies. And I knew that was going to be the day that grandparents were going to be taking their little kids. And part of the experience for me was wanting to see what was on the screen, how it was affecting kids, little kids, who were probably being introduced to those characters for the first time, and just kind of relishing in that experience.
And I think, as someone who was skeptical about the movie, by the way, I mentioned, like, I wasn't really sure, you know, the trailers didn't hook me in, but we've both seen the movie now, and I think both of us agree it really lives up to the spirit of Peanuts and respects everything that came before it and does something a little bit new, but it incorporates all of that wonderful old stuff. If you're a fan of the series previously, at any level, like if you're just sort of like, you know, I've heard of Charlie Brown, you're going to love it. And if you've like read all the comics and seen all the specials, you're really going to love it, because you're going to be like, oh, there's a reference, there's a little thing that appeared there and they kind of reworked it. And if you've never seen Peanuts before, I think you're going to love it too. I don't know. This is a movie that works for almost everybody.
I hope so. I think so. And we exchanged some stuff on Twitter acknowledging, and you pointed out that there were a lot of throwbacks, a lot of callbacks to other, you know, previous cartoons that they had made. And they were nice nods for people that had that sentimental feel, saying, oh, it's a tribute to all these different things that came before. But it was also a very different feel that I thought was kind of designed for a modern audience of kids who are expecting, pardon me, I don't have a cough button, who are expecting things to be a little more faster paced, and those kind of elements that would keep a kid a little more entertained who was already conditioned to higher levels of energy in a cartoon.
And I thought that, I mean, even with the sort of slower stuff, maybe, Charlie Brown's, they split off with Snoopy and do a lot of fun stuff with Snoopy. But even with when you're with the main characters and with Charlie Brown, it's, for one thing, the plot moves along pretty quickly. They don't dither around with too much, and there's a lot of really great laughs. Although I was my theater was packed, and I was like the only person who laughed at some of this stuff, which made me feel bad. I was like, stuff would happen, and I'm like, ha ha ha, and I'm like, there's a whole room full of kids and parents here, and nobody found that funny. It was irritating.
There were a lot of, I don't know if you noticed it. It seemed to me, I mean, a lot of scenes were packed with those things where it had like very short elements that to me they represented what you'd see in a daily comic strip. 1, 2, 3 frames of a comic strip, very quick setup and payoff, very small but simple. And then at the end of the scene, something that would have the larger laugh or the larger payoff that was the tone that would move into the next piece. And then of course the overall arc of the movie that had this amazing emotional payoff at the end was pretty gratifying, I think. And I think that in a lot of ways they had their work cut out for them, because they had to straddle that line of how to be true to the source material while also being a full cinematic experience that carried through to the end. And one of the things that I think that used for that was, and you mentioned Snoopy was more present, a lot more Snoopy stuff. And I think in previous movies, Snoopy was sort of this side entertainment, this sort of jammed in there thing that was like a B plot or just some added element for distraction or entertainment, or almost like a commercial. And in this case, it was actually infused all the way throughout. It's like, here's the piece, Charlie Brown and the friends, something happens. Oh, and let's cut to Snoopy and his little, form of imagination. But I think this is the first time I've seen where they tried to, in some regard, infuse that whole element of Snoopy and his adventures as symbiotic to the plot. Does that make sense?
It worked really well. I mean, and Snoopy, even in the comics, has always been kind of that character, right? Like, if you have a Snoopy part of the comic, you're cutting to him, and he's sending in his submissions to the editors where he's trying to write his great novel, or Being the World Will Run Flying Ace. Like, them directly interacting with him, and there are some great references, by the way, with like when they go in, there's a comic where they go inside his doghouse and he has like a TARDIS thing going on where like it's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. And they mention like, oh wow, you wouldn't expect him to have a Van Gogh. And then like he goes in the movie, he goes in the doghouse and starts chucking stuff out, and you see Van Gogh's Starry Night like fly out of the door and land like next to his dog bowl. Such a great like nod to that little bit of continuity.
One of the things I think, first and foremost, the thing that was most different was just the way that everybody looked. It was a 3D movie, and from what was typically a 2D experience of the flat characters in a simple scene and a very minuscule backdrop, sometimes no backdrop at all. This was all very, very different, very changed. Things were much more fully realized, especially in the Snoopy scenes, very cinematic. How did that go over with you?
Well, so in the main plot scenes, I felt like they did actually a really good job of, yes, it was 3D, but I feel like that they didn't go as far as they could have. They really kept it. I mean, the faces were all still, again, they're technically 3D, but the way they animated them was it had that very 2D aesthetic. If you've seen the trailer even, you kind of know how they worked that. And I thought that they kept the camera very stable in most of the main part of the movie, so it didn't like rip you out of that. But then in the Snoopy scenes, because it's this sort of wonderland of imagination, he's flying around on an airplane, the aesthetic changed quite considerably, and Snoopy is moving really now in all three dimensions in a way that feels a lot more grounded in what we are familiar with in, the cinema that we've seen with 3D and stuff before. And he's still in his doghouse and he's still kind of 2D, but now the backgrounds are a lot more vibrant. They pop more like real backgrounds, and he's fighting the Red Baron. That all stuff looks real. And I felt like that the blending there worked really well, because inside the world of his imagination, it is going to be more vivid. It is going to be more vibrant. And he's sort of in this more staid, boring, flat world with these other characters that kind of represents everyday life, you know, where we're sort of just going through and it's not a lot of exciting stuff happening. But in his mind and in the novel that he's writing, which I really enjoyed that they worked that in as an element, that he's writing and imagining this stuff at the same time, because Snoopy writing stuff is one of my favorite things in the show and in the comic. And to have that layer together worked really well. But those, you know, those escape moments for him, I thought were really well done. And I talked with you about this on Twitter. The only one that I felt really, and I keep thinking about it, I keep wondering if there wasn't, like, maybe this was the best way to go. But in that final scene, when you finally have Charlie Brown suffer his biggest defeat, let's say, right before you kind of get to him maybe picking himself back up, they have a long section with Snoopy. And on the one hand, that felt like, why are we cutting away from the main plot? Why are we away from the important stuff of, you know, I'm invested in what's happening to Charlie Brown. But on the other hand, the way that's set up, you have a big time lapse that happens between when the big sort of fall happens and when, you know, the story picks back up after the Snoopy segments. And I don't know if that would have played as well if you didn't have the Snoopy segment there. So I'm torn back and forth. I feel like maybe it could have been cut down some and made a little bit more punchy for that final battle with the Red Baron. But I feel like also as a storytelling technique, it actually worked really well for what they were working with.
Again, it was almost along the lines of the symbiosis between the A plot and the B plot. The B plot being Snoopy trying to, spoilers, save this girl dog.
I forget what her name is.
I don't remember.
Female dog. She is
female dog.
Is in the comics, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
The love of his life, old what's her name, as he gets
old what's her name. And yeah, so she's kidnapped by the Red Baron and then she's held prisoner in blimp? No, what's the word?
Dirigible. Yeah, blimp.
Dirigible.
Like
that's the word. Yes. And yeah, so I do know this. There was an elderly gentleman sitting right behind me who at that point was snoring loudly in my ear. So whether, you know, who knows why, but those points where, okay, doing this again. And I have to say, I admit my affinity for the Peanuts is not with Snoopy. I know that he's definitely the big popular character with the kids, and how you know they've used Snoopy to amplify certain aspects of culture. Joe Cool was big in the 70s, as an example. You know, I'm not a huge fan of Snoopy, but the Charlie Brown and the core characters has always got me. So when it got to that point, I did kind of feel that same sense. It's okay, all right, let's do this again. But it moved, it kept moving forward, and maybe does, you know, in a sense, help support the undertone of what Charlie Brown was going through. In a sense, I don't know. I did feel two minds about it as well.
The thing with the Charlie Brown thing, and I don't want to give specifics about the conclusion for spoilers, but
you don't want to give spoilers. No spoilers, right?
There's a tricky line to walk there as well. We talked about the trickiness of adapting Charlie Brown, and one of the things that you really want to avoid, and one of the things I was afraid of in the trailers was I was worried they were going to make Charlie Brown cool, and they didn't, but they still had to give him more wins than he usually ever gets in the comics. And right. I thought that, like, that's another line where if you're a hardline Charlie Brown purist, you might have a problem with how this ends, because he does, it's not like he kicks the football or something like that, but he has some success that Charlie Brown is not generally associated with.
Right. Well, and to some extent that, I will say this. Charles Schultz had at some point he'd gone on record saying, you know, acknowledging that the movies are not necessarily canon. And I'm not one of those guys that has to like things have to be canon, and I get all bent out of shape if they're not. But this goes all the way back to the very beginning. With the first, I think the first movie was, my favorite, A Boy Named Charlie Brown. It's the one that I watch it a lot, and days I'm just feeling a little glum or overcast, I pull out that one and I watch A Boy Named Charlie Brown over and over and over again. It's just what I do. But in that one, he wins the school spelling bee and then goes into the big city for the championship spelling bee, and he's celebrated. Like, there's songs, Champion Charlie Brown, and that most of that is a huge win, but it also sets him up for this huge and embarrassing fall. So he does have his wins at some point in various movies, but there's always some degree of corresponding fall, and humbles him back to being the Charlie Brown we all know. And so this one kind of follows along that route as well, because there are some wins that he works really hard for.
Well, and there's the win to, like, I think that, to not to spoil anything, but there are things that he thinks that are gonna be wins, and then they become a different kind of win because of how he handles them.
He sacrifices a lot of his ambitions to do something that is a better thing or a more right thing, oftentimes to his own expense.
Right, and that is ultimately the win that he experiences. And the very end, the sort of speech that is given to Charlie Brown, when I was watching that,
you teared up,
in my mind, it was not the characters necessarily. I mean, obviously it was the characters, but to me it seemed like the son speaking to the father, who's no longer there. But Charlie Brown is sort of a manifestation of all these things that Charles Schulz felt about himself. I think that he generally, personally felt like he wasn't very special, that he wasn't a winner, that he couldn't, he was always chasing the little red hair. The little red hair girl was a real person in his life who, he was never able to be with. And, how much fun is it to be his wife? Knowing that he wrote a whole comic based on his pining. But, that idea of, hey, you're not a loser. You did the right thing. You all, not, people don't see you that way. We see you as someone who is a hero because, of the little things that you did right every day instead of the big, giant, splashy victories. Right. In a sense, I felt like that was, and I don't know what the son's name is, but that was his message to his dad, saying, hey, Dad, you're a winner to me.
Yeah. It's basically, It's a Wonderful Life cast through the characters of Peanuts.
Yeah, I could see that a little bit. Not without the rewriting history and everything, as far as I wish I was never born, but it's that same moral of you are a winner. You just don't, you don't realize it until
wasn't born not early enough to see the premiere of It's a Wonderful Life either. I'm not that old. If you trade out the George Bailey, you trade out George Bailey's ambition to see the world, travel and see the world, trade it out for Charlie Brown's ambition to impress the little redhead girl. And he comes up with all these plans of what he's going to do to impress her and really show off and kind of win the day. And nothing he anticipates doing plays off the way that he hopes. Sometimes because of a decision that he made to sacrifice that ambition to help someone else. No spoilers. And sometimes because life circumstances got in the way and fate just kind of said, nope, you're going to lose again. And yet somebody paid attention and somebody noticed. And in the end, he's still getting into spoiler territory here. Things kind of still worked out.
Yes. If I could tell you my favorite moment for the movie, it would be a huge spoiler. But at the end,
right,
when they're picking names, I thought it was going to go a certain way. I thought it was going to be him having the courage to stand up, and when it went the other way, I was just like, oh! It blew my mind. I was
Wasn't
so
that
excited.
great? Yeah,
Especially because it got him. I was in that moment, again, if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But I was like, are they gonna say the name? Because they can't. Like, that's not how that works. That person doesn't have a name. And then it just, yes.
Okay,
Dang.
so that's this setup um, for what comes next. And if you don't want to be spoiled by it, then turn away now. There's a spoiler coming here. But there's something that they did with this, and to the point where I'm okay with the fact that suddenly time compressed in such a ridiculous way. They got out spoilers. Last day of school, the name pick. And they immediately run out, and there's this carnival, right? And he runs across to go try to connect with her, and the mother says she's already left for summer camp. You know, literally, they just got out of school 2 minutes ago, and she's getting on a bus while all the other kids are at summer camp or are at this carnival. And so he runs, and so that whole time compression really is not. There's a great deal of creative license in there, and that's fine, because what happens then is he gets caught up in that kite string, right? And there's this musical punch that happens not when he gets dragged away by the kite, but when Lucy sees it, and her chin just drops and she sees Charlie Brown is flying up. And at that point, this surge of music starts to kind of overwhelm what already started as the redheaded girl picking his name. You know, it's a long, stretched out buildup of emotional manipulation. And then the whole town, all the kids come out and see this, and it's amazing. So that's the spoiler that finally calms down when she addresses them with those lines. It says, I've seen everything you're doing, and you've been trying to impress me with all these other things, but what I really saw is, and I'm getting chills just thinking, she points out what a good person he is. And he had been trying to be an impressive person, and really what played out today is that he's a good person. And that it was powerful. Okay.
Yeah, I teared up at the end. I'm not gonna lie. Like, even with my kid squirming around him in the seat next to me and wanting to sit on the stairs instead of in his chair, like like when we got to that part, I was just like, that was so sad. I mean, it's happy, but like, I don't know. I was very emotional. Same reaction to Inside Out. Two very powerful films, and honestly, I doubt this one's going to get probably as much recognitions as far as like awards and stuff goes. But
sure, yeah.
In my mind, it's up there with, you know, some of the great movies, especially the ones that came out this year. And I haven't seen The Good Dinosaur yet. It's not out yet, but you know, those movies are, you know, that sort of it's up there with the cream of the crop. And I think it's going to get overlooked because it is simple and it isn't doing anything terribly new.
It's not a groundbreaking movie, and because it has to hold true to what came before, it's not really pushing those boundaries beyond what it's supposed to be. Its ambitions are Charlie Brownish.
Yes, and it succeeds, and it should
cinematically.
This is a movie that should not have worked. I mean, almost on the level of the Lego Movie. I feel there were so many ways for this to go wrong, and somehow they got it right. They got it, everything that I can think of, right. And, you know, other than nitpicky little details like, you know, Peppermint Patty doesn't go to school with Charlie Brown. It's not canon.
It's not canon. And I think I mentioned that, you know, and my daughter and I both had the same perception afterwards. It took me a few minutes to settle in to seeing things so differently. The visuals were just like, okay, what's up? Seeing things like the leather on Charlie Brown's shoes were like, oh man, the wood on the benches and the green on the trees. It took me a few moments to kind of settle in, but what I never really got over was the way that Linus's hair looked.
Oh, really?
And my daughter said the same thing. It just looked so. I don't know what it was. And that really was the only thing that I had that was nitpickish. Beyond that, I agree. and it's not that that's an issue. That was not a travesty, to use your words. Um, I was totally fine with all of that. And that was the only thing I could find that like, oh, that's kind of interesting how they did that. I don't know why. Even though some things weren't canon, and I have some issues with some things that break canon in the cartoons. One of them, I think we talked about a few weeks ago. He kicks the football. He does kick the football, even though to the end of his dying day, Charles Schultz, like, no, he never kicked the football, and he never did. But he did in that one It's Magic Charlie Brown, because he was invisible. Now, true, we never got to see Charlie Brown kick the football because he was invisible when he did it. But that's so still kind of
it's that particular cartoon, to get off track, was such an odd thing. Like, just the way it's played out. There's that like magic show that's like just stops the story for like 5 minutes so they can show somebody performing magic in a cartoon, which isn't that exciting because you can draw whatever. Like, and then like, Charlie Brown actually turns invisible because of the magic trick. And then he's running around like this vengeful demon spirit with this like far deeper voice Charlie Brown than we're used to, which makes the imagery of him running around invisible just all the worse and tormenting Lucy. And yet somehow they pulled something like the image of Charlie Brown putting Snoopy in the box and mixing the box up. That comes from that special. They saw that and they're like, hey, we'll use something from this travesty. That was a travesty. Don't watch that.
It was. There's that, plus the fact he does become borderline insidious in that movie. That's not the Charlie Brown. That's not the humble. He like, okay, no questions. Nobody can blame me for anything. I'm going to do what I want. And I'm like, oh, wow. Charlie Brown is suddenly not all that nice. Yeah. So to me, that one it's very much strays from canon.
It breaks his character is what it does. And that's the biggest no-no to me. You don't just take the character and do whatever you feel like with it. Charlie Brown is a defined character. He has 50 years of comics behind him. Like, it's not that difficult to know what kind of person he is. Right. Anyway, we're not talking about It's Magic Charlie Brown. We're talking about the Peanut movie, and it was good. This is the final thing that I have to say.
Yeah, it was great. Not groundbreaking, but I think that for the most part, it's basically perfect, even though it's up against certain things like Inside Out, which, if that doesn't get some award, then the whole system is broken. I loved Inside Out.
The whole system is broken because the Lego movie didn't get nominated last year, and boo on the system.
That's true. What did take it? I can't recall.
I think it wasn't Frozen because that was the year before. Oh, I don't even know. Big Hero 6? Yeah, it was Big Hero 6.
Oh, I love Big Hero 6.
It's a good movie. I mean, it's a fine movie, but it's just, I think Lego movie's better. It has more to say, speaks to my heart more. But I mean, Big Hero 6 is a decent runner-up. But I mean, the fact that Lego movie didn't even get nominated will be a bone of contention between me and the Academy till my dying day.
That's definitely a travesty.
Yeah. So hopefully this one. I mean, there's only 5 spots in the nomination category. You got to and I think that this one is stylistically interesting enough. The way that they did the 2D and 3D meld, I hope that it gets some kind of recognition, even just for that. And I mean, and the story itself was great. And yeah, like I said at the beginning, if you're a big Peanut fan, a medium Peanut fan, or you've never heard of Peanuts before, I think almost anybody should be able to go into this and enjoy it immensely.
I would think so. Yeah. Except for the old dude that was falling asleep behind me. It's just definitely, I think, works for any age. And any degree of fandom.
He enjoyed the parts that he saw. Sometimes you just get sleepy, Theaters are comfortable.
So anyway. Totally agree. Yeah. Go see it. If you haven't, go see it and take some kids to go see it. My daughter recently was sitting around the table with some friends. She's 12. They're all about the same age. And I overheard a discussion where they were talking about a certain cartoon series from a few years back, and she had never seen it, and they were all shocked. It's like, you've never seen it? They all had seen it. They all known it, and they all loved it. Kids these days, there's not a lot of equanimity behind their experiences of what they see. Because when I was a kid, I don't know if it was when you were, Albert, but when I was a kid, we had cartoons on Saturday morning, and we had 3 or 4 channels on TV. We didn't have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, multitudes of programming that was intended for little audiences all the time. So kids don't always all see the same programming like we did when we were kids. And as such, a lot of the younger audience has no experience of the Peanuts characters whatsoever. And this would be a great way to introduce them to something that is not trying to just come out with explosions and drama. There's some drama in there, but rather it's just simplicity, some fast-paced action, but for the most part, really simple characters that kids can really relate to, wrap their mind around, and understand very, very easily, and still be entertained by. So any audience, any age, I think there's something there for you, and I'd highly recommend going to see it.
I mean, it's about the most basic human struggle, the desire to be loved, really. I mean, that's ultimately what the drama here is, and I think that if you can't identify with that on some level, then, I mean, I'm not going to cast aspersions on the people who didn't like the movie. If you didn't like it, I don't want to get into an argument or something, but I think that that's something that almost all of us understand, the desire to be loved, the desire to succeed. And Charlie Brown is such a powerful character because he wants those things, and he's always failing, but he's always trying. He never loses his optimism, and when he does, he gets it right back again, and he's always hurling himself against the sort of wiles and just problems of fate that keep throwing at him, and it's all, he always has difficulty, but he's always fighting against it, and that's present in this movie, and that's why Charlie Brown works for me.
Yeah.
Anyway, I want to thank John Jones for being on this episode with me. A little short coverage of this movie that I thought was very special and deserved to be talked about. And I want to thank you guys for watching, and tune in at the end of the week for the regular episode.
And don't forget to buy your Octoshark.
Thank you. Yes. I'm not wearing official Human Echo merchandise for this one. I have Spider-Man on me, but cut to John Jones' screen.
Hey, right here. Can you see that? Okay. Yeah. In fact, time for the pitch. Friends, what do you ask of your clothing? If you're like me, much, I'm sure. Just the important things: comfortable fit, classic styling, and trendy designs that catch the eye. If these are what you ask of your clothing, then TeePublic T-shirts, folks, at the Human Echoes podcast is the answer you're looking for. Yes, the fine chaps at the Human Echoes podcast spared no expense, bringing you the Octoshark, no spoilers, and more at prices that won't break the bank. And do these trendy designs turn heads? You betcha. Put on one of these T-shirts, and why, perfect strangers will tell you, "Hey, bub, you've got a lot of nerve." Yes, sirree. These T-shirts are made from the finest artistic craftsmanship and guaranteed to make you the talk of, and they're cotton, so they feel good on the skin and breathe deeply like an Octoshark ought to. TeePublic T-shirts, Human Echoes podcast. Buy yours today and get hella ripped.
We really got to start paying him to do that.
Thank you.
I'm Albert. We'll see you next week,
John.
guys. Bye.